Okay, good evening, everyone. We're going to go ahead and get started. Um, my name is Lisa Miller, and I am with the Planning and Development Department. I'm going to get us started tonight. Welcome. Thanks for joining us. We are here this evening to talk about the new Unified Development Ordinance. But before we jump into content and some other logistics, we wanted to ask our interpreters to share a little bit of information before we get started.
Thank you, Lisa, and thank you everyone for having us. We will be doing our regular Spanish interpretation. So I'm going to make that announcement in English. I'm sorry, in Spanish in a moment, but I wanted to first of all say hello to everyone, and I hope everyone is having a great evening. And also to let you know, should there be any comments in Spanish, please go to the bottom of the screen, go to the globe, select English. That way you can listen to a Spanish commentary in English. If you do not find this globe, you go to the three dots and select language interpretation English. I will post these instructions in the chat. And of course, we always do a regular reminder for presenters to speak at a moderate pace. I'm going to now go ahead and make the announcement in Spanish. Muy bienvenidas y bienvenidos a esta reunión. Como ustedes saben, van a contar con interpretación al español. Pueden escuchar en su idioma preferido y hacer preguntas y consultas con relación al tema. Van a la parte inferior de la pantalla, seleccionan el globito y seleccionan español. O desde un celular o una tableta van a los tres puntos, seleccionan español, interpretación español y terminado para que se les active esta función. Muy bien, y que disfruten de su reunión. Back to you, Lisa. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Mortado, and thank you all for your support this evening. So before we get started, we'll start by talking about the project timeline, but just a couple of logistics for this evening. We will be giving a presentation on the content of what we're calling Module 3, which is focused on public infrastructure, including street type designs, as well as environmental protections. So this is the new body of content that we are sharing with folks, sharing information on, and asking for feedback. So we'll be providing some links for how you can share feedback as we go through this as well. We do have the chat function turned off tonight and the Q&A function turned on. That really helps us make sure that we get to see all of your questions and get through all of them. When we have the chat on, it's very difficult to keep track of what's happening. So bear with us with that functionality, but we will go through and it will be a combination of typing responses to the questions that folks post and reading those aloud to make sure everybody gets that information, regardless of whether you're reading it, and to make sure that information is included in the recording that we're doing. We will be posting a recording of this session in English and in Spanish shortly after today. So that will be up on the website that we'll link later on that you can share with other folks in your neighborhood, in the community that may have missed this opportunity. So with that, we will get started with the content. So what we have here is an overview of the project timeline for the new Unified Development Ordinance. We are in this fall 2025, late fall, going through the subdivision and infrastructure standards. One thing I will call to your attention, in addition to the fact that we have had two previous modules where we shared a lot of information that we'll go over a refresher of briefly tonight. We do anticipate that in early 2026, we will have the full draft of the Unified Development Ordinance ready for folks to look at and provide feedback before we start the public hearing and adoption process for the project. So we have that to look forward to in early 2026. Next slide. So we have just a little bit of background we want to share in case folks who are here haven't had a chance to participate in previous rounds of information and engagement on the project. One of the biggest things we want to communicate is how this project, the new UDO, is an implementation measure from the comprehensive plan. So taking a step back, our comprehensive plan is our vision for how we want to manage growth and change in our community in the next couple of decades. So we undertook a lengthy process to develop a community vision starting in 2019 that culminated in the adoption of our new comprehensive land use plan in 2023. That plan had a whole lot of engagement to try and better understand what are the needs and priorities of folks in our community. A whole bunch of the policies and actions to try and implement the vision in the comprehensive plan specifically reference making changes to our unified development ordinance. So while the comprehensive plan is a big picture kind of long-term vision for how we want to manage growth in a way that yields a particular result and character of community, the Unified Development Ordinance is the set of rules that govern how land can be developed. So this is a legal document. There are things that it can and cannot do, but essentially, anytime that you are proposing to develop a new building, property in a particular way, these are the rules that come into play. So this is a significant part of how we can implement the vision in the comprehensive plan, but it is not the only tool that we use to get at that vision. It can't accomplish everything in the comprehensive plan, despite it being a significant piece of it. So just to kind of follow that, once we have a new unified development ordinance in place, any development project that is proposed will have to follow those rules. So what you see being built in your community in Durham more broadly will be the result of those development rules changing. So next slide. So just a few things we want to highlight about the goals for this project. Continuing on the comp plan implementation kind of theme, there are a number of really important things in that document, focusing on housing affordability, housing access, and different kinds of housing types in Durham. An emphasis on creating pedestrian, human-friendly, transit-oriented development as things change. And increasing recreation and open space, tree canopy, and promoting sustainable development. A lot of those things are coming through this module of content. In addition, the comprehensive plan has what we call a place type map, which identifies a character description that gets assigned to every property within the entire county, city and county. And what we want to do as part of this new Unified Development Ordinance project is to make sure that we have zoning districts which apply rules for development that align with those place types that are described in the comprehensive plan. And finally, the comprehensive plan calls for it establishes an urban growth boundary, which for those of you who are familiar with the development tiers that had been in the previous comprehensive plan, it roughly aligns with where the suburban tier was previously. But this idea that we want to keep growth within that urban growth boundary and not push out beyond that as we are growing and changing. So there are a few other goals for the project really around organization and usability. So expanding the use of graphics which our technical consultant has been hugely helpful with. Removing the development tiers that I just mentioned, that was an action that came through the comprehensive plan. trying to consolidate and simplify the zoning districts as much as possible, putting more emphasis on form, less on specific uses and density, but it will by no means remove use and density regulations. So next slide. So just a quick overview of the previous two modules. The first module was released in the fall of last year, 2024, and it had the new proposed zoning districts. There's 20 some new districts. It included an initial draft map showing those districts applied to different properties within the entire city and county, and provided a use table, which is covering what uses or activities are allowed on in any given zoning district. So those are kind of the three big pieces of Module 1. All of that content is available up on the project website still, including presentations, recordings like we'll have of this one. And we want to make sure that folks know that just because Module 1 was the focus last fall doesn't mean that we're not still asking for and looking for feedback on this content as well as everything else. We're getting to the point where we're about to pull everything together, and we'll have an opportunity to get feedback on everything that has been released so far. So this screenshot here is showing a mapping tool that we've created. This is something that we'll post links to a little bit later in the presentation. But essentially, this map has three different tabs that I'll call your attention to at the top. There's a side-by-side viewer that shows existing zoning on one map next to proposed zoning on the other side, and they zoom in simultaneously, so you can kind of look bigger picture. This slider view, you can zoom in and you could look at a piece of property, and as you slide the slider back and forth, see what's the existing and what's the proposed. And this final tab over here on the right is actually how you can leave feedback on any place-specific thoughts you have on the map. So if you see what's proposed and you think there's something different you think is appropriate, we'd love to hear your feedback. We will be continuing to ask for map feedback, and we'll share a couple of different resources intended to help you all do that. With that, we're going to talk a little bit about Module 2, which was the development standards. This is essentially all of the different kinds of standards that apply across and kind of regardless of zoning district. These were published, and we initially sought feedback on these in the spring/summer of this year. It includes a whole bunch of things, but things like pedestrian access and bicycle mobility, what we're now calling transitions, which includes landscape buffers as well as building step backs to help transition between different uses. It includes standards for fences and walls, lighting, parking lot landscaping, all kinds of things like that. There were a few significant shifts around adding new pedestrian access requirements, as well as updating our landscape requirements to focus on native species, as well as increasing the diversity of species that are required for things like parking lot landscaping. And this next slide has just a quick illustration. We shared this in the last round of engagement, but as a quick kind of illustration of what the development standards focus on. This is intended to show a CN or a commercial neighborhood zoning district, which is this kind of corner here with residential districts adjacent to it, showing the parking located to the side or back of the building, showing, signage, the wall and landscaping at the property lines, the building access, how, parking lot access occurs, all kinds of things like that. So this is really just intended to help visualize what the proposed standards might look like in this example district. So with that, we are going to jump into new content. So as we mentioned at the beginning, Module 3 is focused on environmental protection standards and public infrastructure and improvements. So these are contained in Article 6 and 7 of the proposed code. There are a few notes here. We just want to make sure folks know that the existing protections for riparian buffers or stream buffers, for watershed protection overlays, wetlands, floodplains, and erosion control are all being retained. So we're not going to highlight things around those standards tonight. We're going to highlight the things that are changing. We will talk in more detail about the way that tree coverage requirements are expanding and go through the new NACTO aligned street sections, which is the National Association of City Transportation Officials is what NACTO stands for. And we do have a city council resolution calling for NACTO aligned street sections in our community. So we will be going through some of those. But before we jump into that content, I just want to highlight a couple of things on how the comprehensive plan talks about these topics. So the comprehensive plan does provide a vision to require complete streets design for all new streets, complete streets meaning designed for all of the different road users to use them safely. And it talks about, reducing the travel lane widths for vehicles, which helps reduce speeds, also shortening the pedestrian crossing length so that there's less time where there's potential for conflict between someone walking and someone driving. Calls for providing safe and comfortable options for people to move around, not just in a car, so walking, biking, rolling, and getting to transit stops, and talks about increasing connectivity to create more pedestrian-friendly places, more direct routes, reducing travel distances, and enhancing safety for folks who are moving not in a motor vehicle. In addition, the environmental section of the comprehensive plan has a few big policy items and a vision for more sustainable development practices, as well as preservation of important natural areas and resources. Some of those include establishing 30% of Durham County as permanently conserved land, maintaining or increasing the tree canopy area of Durham County to be 55% and prioritizing native tree species as part of that, encouraging green infrastructure and innovative stormwater management practices, and specifically talks about revising the UDO to increase open space and tree coverage standards. So with that, we will jump into some more detail on Module 3. So to start, we're going to share a little bit of information about street connectivity, block size, and lots. This goal again is for greater connectivity to create a more pedestrian-friendly environment. We did have adopted, I think, in 2023, an amendment to the UDO that created revised connectivity standards. I believe this was initiated by our Planning Commission. The intention is to retain those existing connectivity standards, but just modify them to be referencing the new zoning districts rather than our existing ones. These limit the lengths of streets and promote more pedestrian connections to nearby existing networks. In addition, they call out a maximum block perimeter. So this diagram at the top, you'll see one block size on the left, and then you'll see on the right here additional streets incorporated in order to create smaller block sizes. The block perimeter is just adding up all the sides of the block, and there's a maximum number of feet that that can be. So that exists in our current ordinance and will be retained. One thing we're adding is to include a maximum block perimeter that would apply outside our urban growth boundary, so in some of our more rural areas, but it would be only applied in instances where there's a 10-acre site or greater. And that maximum block perimeter number is greater than inside the urban growth boundary. The proposed lot standards, so shape and size of properties, are generally consistent with our existing requirements. There are new provisions in the ordinance for sublots, which is what this is illustrating here, showing multiple lots accessed off of an easement that connects to the right-of-way. That may limit the creation of new flag lots. And the current ordinance proposes no new dead-end streets, and that new cul-de-sacs would be limited to creating a closed cul-de-sac or close. That's essentially a cul-de-sac that includes open space at the center, which we've got an image of later in the slides. So for our NACTO aligned street sections, one reminder, these are just going to be when new rights-of-way, new streets are proposed and created. So this isn't retrofitting existing streets, but so this will be required for new streets that are constructed. The city will be working on creating and adopting a new street design manual that kind of covers more broadly the full spectrum of street interventions. But this is a way of, as we get new subdivisions proposed, we do have street designs that can help both with that NACTO alignment that was called for by the City Council resolution, as well as aligning with the city's Vision Zero action plan, which for those of you who aren't familiar, the Vision Zero is that we would get to no traffic deaths or fatalities. So it's really focused on prioritizing the safety of all of our different road users. So we do have two different categories of streets, neighborhood streets and mixed use streets. We'll go through it in a little bit of detail, but essentially we're focused on smaller or narrower lane widths, making sure we have bicycle facilities, planted areas for street trees, and accommodating transit. So we'll go through, there's 4 different neighborhood street types to start off. There are some common characteristics among the 4 neighborhood street types, but essentially these are envisioned in residential areas of various size, starting with the first street type, which is a 45-foot right-of-way. It's the narrowest and intended for our lowest traffic and slowest traffic streets within new neighborhoods. These are assumed that speeds would be slow enough and traffic would be little enough that bicycles could share the street with vehicles. It does provide sidewalks and planted street tree area on either side of the street. That does not include on-street parking. The next street type 2 is a 60-foot right-of-way, so a little bit wider. This does include on-street parking on one side of the street and requires what we call bulb outs, where the curb line comes out into the point where the parking lane stops in order to make it so that the crossing distance for pedestrians is shorter and therefore is safer. And there is also then room for a wider planting area in that section where the curb bulbs out. Our next 2, they're are both also 60-foot rights of way, like the street type 2. This type number 3, in addition to the sidewalk facilities and planting areas on either side, it includes a 6-foot bike lane with a 1.5 foot buffer in each direction and does not include on-street parking. And type 4 does include, again, on-street parking on one side and similarly a 12-foot wide multi-use path on one side of the street that would have enough room for both directions of bicycle traffic and pedestrians. Um, with that, we'll jump into our mixed use street types. The first one is also a 60-foot right of way, similar to the neighborhood street type, so smaller. All of the mixed use street types are focused on areas that would be a combination of residences and businesses where you might have more activity, more traffic, more pedestrians moving. Um, so this first type is the narrowest of the mixed use street types. It incorporates sidewalks and bike lanes going on either side of the street. Those bike lanes are separated from the vehicle travel lanes by a physical, slight vertical separation and a planting zone, and no on-street parking is included in that version. Um, Mixed use street type 2 is wider at an 80-foot right of way. This includes a center turn lane. It has an option to use an 11-foot vehicle travel lane if it is along a transit corridor to accommodate buses. It includes sidewalks, bike lanes, and transit shelters and does not include on-street parking. And our last mixed use type is having something in place for what is coming, which is bus rapid transit. There are some corridors identified in the Durham County Transit Plan to have bus rapid transit. So having bus rapid transit generally has dedicated lanes for buses to move in order to allow them to move more quickly than when you have a bus that is mixed with regular traffic. So this is a street type designed to accommodate that when we do have BRT, as it's called, streets in the future. So it has one direction of bus only travel. The other direction has vehicle travel lanes and a turn lane, and it does include sidewalks, bike lanes, and transit shelters, and does not include on-street parking. With that, I think we have just one more slide about alternative streets and streetscape standards. So we will have simplified standards for streetscape elements like pedestrian and planting zones. We've got, street trees, bike racks, things like that that are envisioned within a streetscape. We do also have these two alternative street types that in certain circumstances, in order to reduce the block size, these can be used as a way of creating more connectivity. They're not focused on motor vehicle travel, although the pedestrian passage type is intended to allow emergency vehicles. So one is the pedestrian passage, which includes green space and a clear zone for pedestrian movement. And the other is the multi-use path, which is intended to accommodate, again, both two directions of bicycle movement and pedestrians as separate zones. So these are all, in addition to this, there will also be retention of the existing alley option that we have currently available. So I think that is the end of what I'm going to talk about today, and I'm going to hand it over to Bo to get into some of the environmental protection standards.
Good evening, everyone. Bo Dobrinsky with the Planning and Development Department. I'm going to talk to you a bit about some of our environmental standards and how they work with the infrastructure standards. So for tree coverage and open space, what the new UDO draft will do, or showing now, is we've combined the tree coverage standards with the open space standards in terms of the formatting of the document, place them in one section. This improves usability, makes the requirements a bit more transparent. We've also included the existing requirement to provide public recreation land or a fee in lieu in the same section, so that when folks are looking at these standards, they're able to see them all in one place since they all relate to each other. Additionally, we've expanded a requirement for tree coverage throughout all of the RD zoning district for property or developments that are less than 4 acres to have a 7% tree coverage requirement. Currently, in similar instances, there would be no tree coverage requirement at all. So that is an expansion of this requirement. The conservation subdivision, as it is currently in the UDO, will no longer exist, but we have incorporated many of the areas to be required in all subdivisions. So the primary conservation areas, as listed in the conservation subdivision, are now listed to be required for all subdivisions in all districts, and more, so they'll be preserved in more instances when they exist on site. Also incorporating some incentive structures for green stormwater infrastructure, public art, preservation of natural resources, historic structures within the open space itself. Next. This here just showing the more stringent tree coverage requirements. As I said, the example of the 7% tree coverage to be required for developments in RD that are 4 acres or less. This is in addition to the street tree requirements that we currently have, and that will continue. Additionally, we've expanded, or we're proposing to expand and increase the tree preservation requirements for development greater than 4 acres in RD or RX3, rather than 20%, increasing them to 22% in this example. This slide is just a representation of the various types of recreation open space that is an option or required to be provided with these residential developments. Mini parks are small spaces designed for passive recreation. Obviously, you could have a larger park space. Greens are more informal and typically used to preserve key natural features. A closed cul-de-sac, so internal of the cul-de-sac, providing a green space in the middle of the turnaround. There's also green belts and parkways. For green belt, oftentimes this will be the conservation land, and it'll include trails or greenways, maybe some benches. And parkways are similar, but along the transportation. Another way for a development to get credit for the active open space is amenitizing their stormwater facility. This could be done through educational signage, docks and piers, maybe a water feature such as a fountain. We've talked already about incentivizing public art. So if public art is provided within the open space, there's a slight reduction there. This is to really get at some policy or to get at our focus on more public art in more areas of Durham, and also plazas and courtyards. These are intended to be public spaces for folks in the community to gather. And then there's an opportunity for flex space. And then the natural and cultural resources, this is a above and beyond tree coverage requirement. Could include wildlife corridors or habitats, Piedmont prairies, existing cemeteries, and also sites that are eligible or designated as on the National Register of Historic Places, among some other priorities for preservation. Regarding riparian buffers, we've made some updates to the language to improve clarity. and effectiveness. Currently, there's some inconsistencies between the language within the current standards. So while retaining the existing standards, we've helped clarify that this will make it easier to enforce both as a part of the site plan review process or if there are any encroachments. It's also incorporating recent updates to the new server basin requirements. And just to note, we're also retaining all of the current impervious surface restrictions in the watershed protection overlay districts. So for this slide, just really showing how all these requirements work together. Here on the left, you'll see in plan view of this potential subdivision. You'll see the tree coverage. You'll see a stream to the top left being protected by a riparian buffer. Same mix of housing types as well as lot sizes throughout the community. You can see the connectivity standards that Lisa mentioned earlier, including the smaller block sizes and some of the pedestrian access connections that are being provided. And then, of course, the street trees along the streets and the stormwater control measures on each side of the development. Thanks. And here we've got that second neighborhood street type showing along these single family homes. These are alley loaded units with driveway access and with a wider planting zone for the street trees and the bulb outs, and you just kind of see how it all relates to the new residential development along with the newly proposed NACTO aligning street type. This next example with the RD2, so this is an option in the RD district where a development would commit to a smaller residential unit, 1,200 square feet or less, and therefore they can construct a greater density. So in this option, you can build one unit per 1,250 square feet of land area. And so this site design shows these smaller units, some of them with just pedestrian access, sort of a cottage court style development. And you also see a shared driveway for shared vehicular access. This will help preserve pervious surface and green space while allowing for more dense development and a mix of housing types within one development. You'll also note on the slide, you'll see the RD2 option has a standard or a requirement for for porches, among other requirements for that option, and you'll see that in this diagram. And then for the RD3 option, this is the optional development guidelines where a development, if it provides a portion of the units to be available at an affordable price of 60% AMI for rental or 80% AMI for sale, you can have up to 1 unit per 625 square feet of land area. So in this example, you'll see up to 4 units in each structure within the neighborhood with a mix of housing type. This is the N1 street type. So this is a slower traffic with a shared vehicular and bike space, and just sort of an example of how all of these requirements can work together. This slide here, really just zooming in on a potential open space. You'll see the pedestrian access, see the different types of street types throughout the development, as well as the housing types using the various development options. So where you have single family and also multiplex dispersed throughout the neighborhood with the NACTO aligning street types as well. And that's it in terms of showing how the neighborhood and infrastructure requirements all work together. Next bit that I'm going to talk about is a new requirement in this new UDO, a sustainability development matrix. And so this is uh, our our goal here is to encourage and require more sustainable development to the best of our abilities. One thing I would like to note is many of these requirements that you'll see on the slide and in the materials uh, are we are not permitted in requiring them on any residential development using residential building code. So we are operating within state law um, by choosing these applicability standards. And so I'll explain. In the RD, if you choose the second option, which is the smaller units, or the third option, which is the affordable unit requirement, we would then be requiring them to meet the sustainability matrix. And so this is above and beyond what we're typically required or typically allowed to require. And then the sustainability matrix would apply universally for multifamily and for the non-residential districts listed below for larger structures. So 8,000 square feet or greater. And I'm not going to read through all of these sustainability measures, but things like providing all the trees to be planted, to be native landscaping, additional conservation areas, additional riparian buffers, preserving buffers around wetlands that are greater than the UDO required. Have some additional examples on the next slide. Yes, encouraging using urban agriculture as one of the options to make the required scoring. Green stormwater infrastructure. So that's not something that we can typically require, but here as a measure in one of the options within the matrix, the developer or development could choose one of these options. Speaking a bit about the building design, this is where trying to get it more sustainable development with examples such as the EV charging stations or green building standards such as like a LEED certification. These are many of the suggestions came from the Environmental Affairs Board and others that we've engaged with, other bodies and folks in the community. Still in the draft, this is actually just a great opportunity while we go through the engagement process on this third module. We certainly expect or hope and expect to receive various suggestions from the community on different ways and different potential requirements to place in this. And now I'll turn it back over to Lisa to talk about next steps.
Thanks, Bo. Just responding to a question. Bear with me. Great. So we wanted to just highlight a few resources for everyone, and then we'll go through some Q&A stuff. I did, let's see, just dropped in the chat a link to what we call our Code Connect meetings. These are presentations by our technical consultant that have been happening regularly throughout the project as we have new content to share with residents. They walk through what that content is. All of those have been recorded and posted on a YouTube playlist on the city's YouTube page, available in both English and Spanish. So if you want to go back and get an understanding of other modules of content, or if you want to take a look at the recording from this module, you can check that out at the link I dropped in the chat. We also have engagement materials, another couple of links that I dropped in the chat a moment ago. The engagement materials page is really all of the presentations, handouts, recordings, and links to feedback opportunities that are all on that page for Module 3 content. So that is kind of a one-stop shop for understanding what all of the information is for where we are in the project right now and how to give your feedback. This is, again, those links are in the chat. And you'll see, and go back for just a minute on that slide, the map input towards the bottom of the slide there, that will have a link both to that interactive map that we talked about presentation, where the comment tool is housed. It also has 3 different resources. One that's a how-to guide if you're looking at that map and you're like, I'm not quite sure how to leave feedback. It walks you through how to do that. The other 2, one is a quick guide to understanding the new districts. So if you're leaving feedback on the district that's proposed on the map, you have a kind of a quick understanding of what that district is about. And if you want to propose something different, some information about the other options. And the final resource around that map input is a key to kind of connecting our place types, which we talked about earlier, that were mapped out as part of the comprehensive plan and kind of our vision for future of our community. Which of the proposed zoning districts would implement the vision of a particular place type? And the place types are also shown on that interactive map. So there's a whole bunch of information there for you all to take a look and go into more detail, as well as to share with anybody, friends, family, neighbors, to help us get more feedback and make this project better. So I think our last couple slides here, we have been hosting what we call office hours. Basically, this is just a couple times a month where we are available as staff for anybody who walks in and wants to ask questions or talk about the project. We are in kind of the cafe space, right when you come into the main entrance of the Durham County Main Library downtown. Um, we are there the first Thursday of every month in the afternoon and the third Thursday in the morning. And we do have a special additional option next Tuesday from 3 to 6 as well. Really just trying to make ourselves available to folks who want to ask more detailed questions. So we invite you to come to those. And then we have our project website. You can just go to engagedurham.com. There are other projects over there that you can take a look at, but the new UDO is one of those. All kinds of project information is available there. And you can also send an email to newudo@durhamnc.gov. And that will go to our staff team that's working on this project, so that the most appropriate person to respond to your question can do that. And I think our last slide is, we'll just leave this up. So QR code for taking the feedback survey on Module 3 in English on the left and Spanish on the right. So we'll just leave that up as we are talking. But what we are going to do, my colleagues are going to keep taking a look at the questions that are being posed in the Q&A. For anybody who hasn't seen, if you open up the Q&A button, you will be able to see questions that have been asked and answered. But just to make sure everybody has access to that information, I'm just going to run through the questions that have been answered already. But as I do that, feel free to add additional questions in the chat, and we'll go through those as well. So one of the first questions we got was referencing the city council just voted down a property owner trying to get rid of a cul-de-sac. This was on Monday night this week, asking why adopt plans if you vote down proposals. So just the rules in the new UDO would only apply to new cul-de-sacs. Closing an existing cul-de-sac can only be done through a vote of city council on a case-by-case basis. There are definitely different considerations when you're dealing with existing street types than if you're talking about what we want when we're building new. We had a question about whether new tree plantings will count towards the tree canopy areas. which is a great question. The street trees that are required and the trees that are part of the parking lot landscaping requirements, those are separate requirements from any tree coverage areas. So it would be both street trees and parking lot landscaping and tree coverage areas. We had a question looking for additional information on the new provisions for sublots that would limit how much we're seeing new flag lots. So there's a reference here to the full draft of Module 3 content is linked here. The sublot information is on page 6-10. And definitely, if there are more detailed questions about that, that's a great office hours conversation, or feel free to drop more questions in the chat or in the Q&A. We had a question about whether the site design, I believe this was during the example site that was shown, follow the setback rules, and what about emergency vehicle access requirements? So yes, that example and all development will have to follow setback or build to rules. So how far or how close to the street you need to be. And we are working with emergency service folks to ensure that our new standards allow emergency access as required. There's a question about whether the quad or 4-unit residential building is only allowed with the affordable housing option. And that, yes, in the RD district that was being shown in that example. Let's see. So a question about whether the rendering that was shown would be buildable under the new rules, or would there be additional requirements for emergency access, stormwater, etc. So fire code, building code, stormwater code, and other applicable regulations would be required to be met in addition to the UDO. We've been working with all of our regulatory partners to ensure that we have consistency across those requirements as much as possible. That should be reflected in the code and in the renderings that we've shown. So the subdivision does show a couple of different stormwater control measures and streets that meet fire code, for example. There was a question about what they, I think meaning applicants or developers, get for the points in the sustainable development matrix. So essentially, on that first slide around the sustainable development matrix, Bo mentioned 4 projects that are in the RD district, and they're doing the opt-in with greater density when providing smaller units, or greater density when providing units that meet that affordability requirement. There is a certain number of points they have to meet, and same for other districts where there's just a flat out, you have to meet this number of points. So essentially, the matrix is showing how will you meet that minimum requirement of points. So a particular, providing solar panels has a certain number of points, and you will combine different items in the sustainability matrix in order to get to that number of points that's required. I think we're pulling that up now. So another question about the sustainable matrix, does it apply to zoning change requests or only when the development happens? This is something that is put in place to be applied for administrative approvals at the site plan stage. So this isn't something that applies at the rezoning stage, although somebody could certainly proffer to do things like this. This is something that comes into play when a site plan is proposed. Let's see, we have a question for 746B26. We are going to follow up with you, Ken, on that one. Since I don't have the reference in front of me also, but if you want to add anything else in the Q&A, just let us know. So I have a question about, with all of the space needed for upgraded streetscapes, wouldn't it reduce the number of units that can be built? So that these new street types do require wider rights of way in some instances. Although part of this is trying to reduce some aspects of the street widths. There obviously the additional conservation areas may also have an impact. But there's other provisions like reduced setbacks that encourage more dense development to kind of address that trade-off so that we can have both green space and safe streets and also have the units that we need and that can hopefully create some affordability. Let's see, we have a question. Does the UDO in general show what's required at each stage of development, such as the planning commission hearing, city council approval of the zoning change, planning staff post approval, etc. So yeah, the administrative section will be included with the whole full draft of the ordinance that we talked about will be shared in the winter, early 2026. So the details of application process, things like that, will all be part of that piece of the administration piece of the code. Question about whether we can talk about specific projects and how the new UDO would affect them at office hours. Yes, that is the perfect place to do that. Please come and talk with us, ask your questions there, or feel free to drop an email to the project email address that I'm dropping in the chat right now. That's another great way to ask questions if you're unable to come to office hours. A question about whether consideration has been given for making on-site stormwater management requirements housing type agnostic. So allowing small multifamily the same exemptions as single-family homes as long as impervious surfaces are below a set level. So we've had some preliminary discussions around this, but would require an amendment to the Stormwater Development Code, which is a code that works in conjunction with the UDO, but is a separate set of rules. So we can stay tuned on that one. All right, the last question in our answered questions here, we've got what happens next in the process after December 7th? Is there another more formal venue to provide comments on the UDO after that, or is the survey the primary/final opportunity? There are definitely more opportunities. In addition to, as we mentioned, we'll be publishing and sharing the full draft ordinance in early 2026. Then the project will be going through the adoption process, which includes multiple public hearings. It has to go before the Planning Commission, as well as the City Council and the Board of County Commissioners. And comments and feedback are part of that process up until adoption. So there are definitely additional opportunities that are available. Let's see. We have a few more questions in the Q&A that are not answered yet. Bo, do we want to answer any of these live, or what is your gut?
Sure. Mimi Kessler's asked about a chart that shows the changes in setbacks. I will say that we are working on a quasi chart that will help communicate that. Because the districts aren't like one to one in every instance, it won't be as easy as, existing RU5 turns in, these setbacks translate to these new ones. But we're working on something like that to help communicate some of these changes better. And obviously, we'll share that out when we have it. And just to go back to that, Mimi and all of you, part of the reason why that's not as easy is just the new UDO has the setbacks clearly in the 2 pagers that we've shown in that first module. Whereas our current UDO, the setbacks are sort of all over the place. So it takes a little bit of um, combining all that.
Bo, do you want to respond to there's one last outstanding question right now?
Have any documents been compiled that show the cumulative amount of non-buildable area, thinking things like total restricted area for tree canopy setbacks, stormwater lot coverage, particularly for smaller lot quad development? Seems quite burdensome and could prohibit the ability to develop affordable units under RD. Um, I'm not sure I understand the question completely. I'll try and answer the best I can. We are certainly trying to factor in all of these requirements, such as the required tree coverage, the stormwater control measures, um, as well as any requirements for lot coverage itself, and recognizing the trade-off with the additional density needed to build those affordable units. And so certainly our intention is to factor all of those in. Feel free to follow up with me if the question is getting at something different than that. And just in terms of mapping it, we've used different examples to try and address that. Obviously, we showed you a few versions of the same one, but the idea there is trying to look at real sites and how they would develop with all of the requirements.
Great, thank you both. We don't have any more questions in the open Q&A category at the moment, but just wanted to see. I'm gonna share my screen for a moment while y'all can think about whether you have any other questions for us, just to show you the website information so that is accessible. So this is the main page for the project. So engagedurham.com/new UDO. We've got the engagement materials link that I dropped in the chat is this page here, where you can see our presentation slides from this evening in English and Spanish, a couple of updated handouts, project overview and timeline, a big glossary that we've been adding to along the way, and calling out, some of the actions in the comprehensive plan that are specifically talking about making changes to our Unified Development Ordinance. And this is where you'll see the recording of this session tonight, linked when it is available. This big text here is the link to the survey, as well as providing it here, English and Spanish. And those resources I mentioned, both the link to the comparison map showing existing and proposed zoning and the way to comment is available here, and these resources in English and Spanish for how to kind of inform your map comments, a little bit of information about other modules of the project. So just wanted to share that with everyone. Maybe give folks another moment to drop any last minute questions in the chat before we wrap up. And I guess I would just encourage all of you to share any of this information with your friends, neighbors, family members. We're really interested in trying to get more folks involved in taking a look at the proposed content, getting their feedback on both the proposed regulations and the proposed map. And we'll be continuing to do that through the adoption process as well. But if there are no more questions, Bo, anything else you want to add?
No, I would just also double down on thanking everybody for their participation, and getting the word out there. And I look forward to talking to many of you about the proposal. Thanks.
Yep, please come to office hours, and thank you all. Yeah, we really appreciate your interest in this and trying to make sure that we get this right. So thanks for your time, and I hope you all have a great and safe evening. Take care.